Welcome to the White Collar Files, your deep dive into the fascinating world of financial crimes and corporate misdeeds. I'm your host, Ethan, and today we're kicking off our journey with a look at the origins of the term white collar crime. Buckle up for a riveting exploration of how this phrase came to define an entire category of criminal behavior. If you're ready to unravel the threads of history, let's dive in. The term white collar crime has become ubiquitous in our modern lexicon, conjuring images of suited executives engaging in elaborate financial schemes. But where did this phrase originate, and how has it shaped our understanding of criminal behavior in the corporate world? To trace the roots of white collar crime, we need to travel back to the late 1930s, a time of significant social and economic upheaval in the United States. The Great Depression had ravaged the economy, exposing deep-seated inequalities and sparking a re-evaluation of societal structures. It was against this backdrop that a pioneering sociologist and criminologist named Edwin Sutherland stepped onto the stage. Sutherland was no ordinary academic. Born in 1883 in Gibbon, Nebraska, he had already established himself as one of the most influential criminologists of the 20th century by the time he coined the term white-collar crime. His work was characterized by a keen interest in understanding the social contexts of criminal behavior, moving beyond the simplistic notions of crime that dominated his era. In December 1939, Sutherland addressed the American Sociological Society, proposing a new term that would fundamentally alter the landscape of criminology. He introduced the concept of white-collar crime, challenging the prevailing notions of criminal behavior and those who perpetrate it. But it wasn't until 1940 that Sutherland fully fleshed out his groundbreaking idea. In a publication titled White-Collar Criminality, he offered a clear definition of the term: a crime committed by a person of respectability and high social status in the course of his occupation. This definition was revolutionary, shifting the focus from the stereotypical image of the common criminal to include those who occupied positions of power and respectability in society. Sutherland's concept was a direct challenge to the dominant theories of crime at the time. Most criminologists of the era focused on what we might call blue-collar or street crimes: theft, assault, and other visible offenses often associated with poverty and social disadvantage. The prevailing wisdom suggested that criminal behavior was primarily a result of economic deprivation or psychological abnormality. But Sutherland saw something different. He observed that many harmful and illegal acts were being committed by individuals who didn't fit the typical profile of a criminal. These were people of high social standing, respected members of their communities, who were using their positions of trust and authority to commit crimes for personal or organizational gain. This realization was profound. It suggested that criminal behavior wasn't solely the domain of the disadvantaged or the psychologically troubled. Instead, it could be found at all levels of society, including, and perhaps especially, among those who were considered pillars of the community. Sutherland's concept of white-collar crime was not just an academic exercise. It had real-world implications for how society understood and dealt with criminal behavior. By highlighting crimes committed by the powerful and respected, Sutherland was shining a light on a form of criminality that had often gone unnoticed or unpunished. Consider the context of the time. The 1930s had seen the fallout from the stock market crash of 1929, which had exposed widespread fraud and manipulation in the financial sector. The subsequent Great Depression had laid bare the consequences of unchecked corporate greed and financial mismanagement. Sutherland's concept of white-collar crime provided a framework for understanding these events not as mere economic mishaps, but as criminal acts committed by individuals in positions of power. But Sutherland's ideas didn't gain immediate acceptance. Many in the legal and criminological communities were resistant to the idea that respectable businesspeople could be considered criminals. The notion challenged deeply held beliefs about the nature of crime and criminals. Moreover, the very people who were being labeled as potential white-collar criminals, the wealthy and powerful, had significant influence over how laws were made and enforced. This made it difficult to gain traction for the concept in legal circles. Despite these challenges, Sutherland's ideas gradually began to take hold. Over the following decades, lawmakers and law enforcement agencies started to pay more attention to crimes committed in boardrooms and executive suites. New laws were enacted to address specific forms of white-collar crime, and enforcement efforts were stepped up. It's important to note that many of the statutes that criminalized certain white-collar offenses were yet to be enacted when Sutherland first proposed his concept. According to the Report Measurement of White-Collar Crime using Uniform Crime Reporting (UCR) data, most white-collar crime laws were enacted during three distinct time periods: antitrust laws during the Progressive Era of the 1920s, social welfare laws during the New Deal era of the 1930s, and consumer protection laws during the 1960s. This gradual evolution of the legal landscape reflects the growing recognition of white-collar crime as a serious issue. As society became more complex and interconnected, the opportunities for white-collar crime expanded, necessitating new legal frameworks to address these evolving forms of criminal behavior. Today, white-collar crime is recognized as a major category of criminal behavior, encompassing a wide range of offenses including fraud, embezzlement, insider trading, money laundering, and cybercrime. The FBI estimates that white-collar crime costs the United States more than $300 billion annually, although the true extent and cost are difficult to determine due to the often hidden nature of these crimes. The characteristics of white-collar crime, as we understand them today, align closely with Sutherland's original concept. These crimes are typically focused on deceit and concealment rather than physical force. They're generally non-violent in nature, with the primary goal being financial gain. They often involve positions of trust and power, and can be challenging to detect due to complex schemes and cover-ups. Interestingly, the profile of the typical white-collar criminal has remained relatively consistent since Sutherland's time. Today, most white-collar criminals have a college education, are in a position of power, and are middle-aged males. This demographic consistency underscores the enduring relevance of Sutherland's original observations about the nature of these crimes and those who commit them. The impact of white-collar crime on society is profound and far-reaching. Unlike violent crimes, which tend to have localized effects, white-collar crimes can have diffuse impacts, affecting multiple victims over long periods of time. The financial losses can be staggering, but the damage goes beyond mere dollars and cents. White-collar crimes can erode public trust in institutions, destabilize economies, and exacerbate social inequalities. Consider some of the high-profile white-collar crime cases that have made headlines in recent years. The Enron scandal in the early 2000s, which involved widespread accounting fraud, led to the collapse of one of America's largest corporations and had far-reaching effects on the energy industry and financial markets. The Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme, uncovered in 2008, defrauded investors of an estimated $64.8 billion, devastating countless individuals and organizations. More recently, the case of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos has captured public attention. Holmes, once hailed as a visionary entrepreneur, was convicted of fraud for deceiving investors about her company's blood testing technology. The Theranos case, which saw a company once valued at $9 billion exposed as a con, serves as a stark reminder of the potential for deception and fraud even in seemingly innovative and promising ventures. These high-profile cases represent just the tip of the iceberg. For every headline-grabbing scandal, there are countless smaller-scale white-collar crimes that never make the news but collectively cause enormous harm to individuals, businesses, and society as a whole. The evolution of technology has opened up new frontiers for white-collar crime. Cybercrime, identity theft, and sophisticated financial fraud schemes have become increasingly prevalent in our digital age. These new forms of white-collar crime present unique challenges for law enforcement and regulators, requiring constant adaptation and innovation in detection and prevention strategies. At the same time, the globalization of finance and business has made it easier for white-collar criminals to operate across international borders, complicating efforts to investigate and prosecute these crimes. The rise of cryptocurrencies and other digital assets has created new opportunities for money laundering and financial fraud, further blurring the lines between legitimate business activities and criminal enterprises. As we reflect on the origin and evolution of the term white-collar crime, it's clear that Sutherland's concept has had a profound and lasting impact on our understanding of criminal behavior. By broadening our perspective on what constitutes crime and who commits it, Sutherland challenged us to look beyond stereotypes and consider the complex social and economic factors that contribute to criminal behavior at all levels of society. The recognition of white-collar crime as a distinct category of criminal behavior has led to significant changes in law enforcement, regulatory frameworks, and corporate governance. Today, companies invest heavily in compliance programs and internal controls to prevent and detect white-collar crime. Regulatory bodies have expanded their oversight and enforcement capabilities. And public awareness of white-collar crime has grown, leading to increased scrutiny of corporate behavior and demands for accountability. Yet despite these advances, white-collar crime remains a persistent and evolving challenge. The sophisticated nature of these crimes, the resources available to those who commit them, and the complex legal and regulatory landscape in which they occur all contribute to the ongoing difficulty in effectively combating white-collar crime. As we move forward, it's clear that the concept of white-collar crime will continue to evolve. New technologies, changing business practices, and shifting social norms will undoubtedly give rise to new forms of white-collar crime. At the same time, our understanding of these crimes and our strategies for preventing and prosecuting them will need to adapt. The legacy of Edwin Sutherland's groundbreaking work reminds us of the importance of challenging our assumptions and looking beyond the surface when it comes to understanding criminal behavior. By recognizing that crime can occur at all levels of society, including among those we consider respectable and trustworthy, we open ourselves up to a more nuanced and comprehensive approach to crime prevention and justice. As we conclude this exploration of the origins of the term white-collar crime, it's worth reflecting on how this concept has shaped our understanding of criminal behavior and our approach to justice. From Sutherland's initial proposal in 1939 to the complex landscape of white-collar crime we navigate today, the journey has been one of constant evolution and adaptation. The story of white-collar crime is far from over. As our society continues to change and evolve, so too will the nature of these crimes and our strategies for combating them. By staying vigilant, continuing to challenge our assumptions, and remaining committed to justice and accountability at all levels of society, we can hope to build a future where white-collar crime is less prevalent and its impacts less devastating. That brings us to the end of today's episode of the White Collar Files. I hope you found this exploration of the origins of white-collar crime as fascinating as I have. If you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this episode a like. Your support helps us continue to bring you in-depth explorations of the world of white-collar crime. Until next time, I'm Ethan, reminding you to stay curious and keep questioning. Thanks for listening.